All right, so everybody should be seeing my screen composting at home. Um, Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Awesome. Okay. All right. So tonight we have, I believe this was number one in the Georgia Green Landscape Stewards program. This is composting. So I know I've done at least one other, I think I did vermicomposting, and that really took a deep dive into worms and how they're used in composting. So this will be kind of pulling back a little bit and just giving a really super broad overview of composting in general. This particular program is, and we'll talk a little bit more about it as we get through the slides here. We'll go ahead and advance through the next couple so we can kind of talk about the program a little bit. This is funded by the Center for Urban Agriculture, which is down in Griffin. They do a lot of green landscape type stuff. Just anything and everything that you can kind of think of. If you've done the Georgia Pollinator Census, that's in conjunction with the Center for Urban Ag. If you have a landscape professional, a lot of times they're certified through the different programs that they do down there at the Center for Urban Ag. If you've ever been down to the Griffin campus, it's beautiful. It unfortunately was hit by the tornado that we had. I think it was earlier this year, late last year, but pretty much survived unscathed, with the exception of a few tree branches that came down. But lots of good stuff comes out of this particular portion of extension, the campus down there. So the Georgia Green Landscape Steward Certification Program provides the educational resources, being this particular presentation that I'm giving, along with a whole bunch of others that teach Georgians about protecting natural resources, increasing plant animal biodiversity, conserving soil and water, providing habitat for wildlife and pollinators, and improving public and environmental health. So it's kind of a holistic viewpoint, of looking at not just one thing, like the pollinator census, for instance. That's a great program. You get to be a citizen scientist, you're counting pollinators. So you're definitely contributing. This is kind of looking at all aspects, composting, mulching, you can see the list there, pollinator habitat, welcoming wildlife to your property, whether it's a 1/4 acre or 5 acres or 100 acres. Water conservation, water quality, maintaining that's very important in a suburban environment, especially. I know a lot of folks have experienced lots of runoff. You see that in your subdivision. We had some folks complaining last night at the Master Gardener meeting about rainfall that was just coursing down their street and then causing washouts on their property. Stormwater, again, and that aspect, invasive species and native plants and biodiversity. So it's a little bit of everything. And each program, this is just one, this is just composting, will talk at a very broad level about that particular subject. So, just know that some of our other programs may be much more in-depth, and you may have a lot of knowledge about these subjects anyway, which is great, but this kind of gives you an idea. If you're not a master gardener, which, as I mentioned, there are a lot of you on here, gives you an idea of what this program is about and gives you a little bit more knowledge so that you can kind of decide if you want to do this program. So this kind of brings about the sustainable land management practices that we hope you guys do anyway, but even if you don't do them, you might consider starting the process of this certification, because it helps to reduce invasive species. You can increase native native plantings. There's a lot of places locally that you can source native plants, improving wildlife and pollinator habitat, and reducing landfill waste through the composting, non-point source pollution, that kind of stuff. Also reducing pesticide use. We really talk a lot about integrated pest management, or IPM. We evangelize that because that's much better for the environment. We're not against pesticides, but we do want folks to understand that using mass quantities of them is just, it's not good for the environment. It's not good for the pollinators. It's not good for us. So using them, but being very careful and being much more aware of what's going on in your environment so that you don't have to use them as much is a good thing. Maintaining healthy soils, increasing biodiversity, that's going to help across the board. And the one thing that's pretty cool about this program and why I like it is because you get this fantastic, really cool aluminum sign that you can put up in your yard. So yes, I am certified. I went through the program. It's not hard. You can watch me, or if you don't want to watch me because I'm not that fun to watch, you can actually go to the website. I'll take you there after this, and all of the videos are there. You can also, we're recording this, so if you prefer to listen to me and Eric, you can go to our YouTube and you can watch it there. So what is compost? Well, compost is basically a soil amendment. It's really that really dark, rich, organic matter that's dark and crumbly. And we all love to, if we can get a hold of it, either in a bag of black cow, or maybe we have our own compost bin or something like that. Really good, rich compost smells good. The soil, just your plants eat it up. It's a good amendment to add to your garden, be it flower or vegetable. It helps improve soil health, and it also provides really good essential nutrients to plants. So compost is a result of the natural decomposition process that's going to turn nutrients from something that was alive, like your grass clippings, into that rich organic humus. And that's that's created during the production of compost. So it's basically just recycling your organic materials that you have around the house, your kitchen scraps, tree trimmings, things out of your vegetable garden, all of that stuff, your grass clippings, your leaves, maybe some chipped up branches that you had after you were, done cutting stuff down. And that all kind of combines to make this really valuable black gold, if you will, that all living things growing out of the ground enjoy. So why compost? Well, there's a lot of good reasons. If you're looking at it from the viewpoint of this program, it's going to reduce waste that's going to go into a landfill. So if you're in some parts of Gwinnett County, you may have to get the bags, the paper bags that you get from Home Depot or something like that, where they'll pick those up and you can stuff the leaves in there, that kind of thing. So really, you want to try to eliminate that. Not only does it cost money to buy those bags, but that takes up space in landfills. So if you can reduce the amount of organic matter that leaves your property, that's going to help landfills. It's going to make for less stinky trash. So a lot of the, let's face it, some of us have cleaned our refrigerators out and there's some scary stuff in there. So you can take that and you can compost it. I'm not talking about your leftover meatloaf from last week. Well, most of you know that's probably not what's supposed to go in there. I'm talking about the carrots that you forgot have been in there for a month or a little wilty and you don't really want to use them. Maybe it's the stinky potatoes that started to rot underneath your sink. You want to go with vegetative matter. So we'll talk a little bit more on the next slide, but you're going to get rid of all of that stuff. Me, I have worms, so I do vermicomposting. The worms get it, and they're perfectly happy about it, and they like that. So it's a good place for me to, I guess, reduce the amount of trash that I have. Just to give you an idea, I have a family of 4, and we probably put maybe 2 bags of trash out a week. We recycle and we compost. So between my worms and my chickens, I don't have a whole lot of green anything that goes into the trash, unless I have lazy kids who don't want to take it to them, but I don't count them. So it's also going to improve soil quality. So after you have the compost, after it's fully decomposed, you're going to have this really rich organic humus. You don't have to go pay $10.50 or $11.50 for a bag of black cow. You have your own. So that's going to save you some money. Fertilizer, organic matter, and garbage fees. I mean, you can't lose here, right? So how do you compost? Again, this is just a very broad overview. So generally speaking, you have your browns and you have your greens. And those two things combined are going to give you compost over time. So you're looking at about 1/3 greens, which is going to provide your nitrogen component, like grass clippings or leaves or, branches, the green, let's say you did some pruning or something like that. And then you have 2/3 browns or carbon. That's going to be leaves, like leaves that would have fallen off the tree last year. Maybe you've got some chipped up wood chips that you had. We try to go for things that are a little bit more processed versus like big branches where you have to really take some time to have that breakdown. I would recommend putting those in a separate pile. Nature will kind of take care of itself. You've got termites and other types of decomposing insects, dry rot with the fungi and things like that. So, but in your pile for your compost, for your humus to add to your garden, these are the kinds of things that you'll want. And then you add air, water, bacteria, and then in later stages, the microorganisms, the earthworms, insects, bacteria, microbes, those kinds of things. They're going to work on all of that, and they're going to continue to break all that down. There's a lot of different ways you can compost, and some take less time and some take more time. So you just have to kind of figure out, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, what works best in your situation. Okay, greens versus browns. So greens are going to be your vegetables and your fruit scraps, your grass clippings, that kind of stuff. I mean, you can kind of see in that picture there what your greens would definitely be because they're green, they stand out, right? And then brown is going to be dry leaves, sticks and twigs, straw, like pine straw, maybe some wheat straw, that kind of thing. Definitely pretty easy to tell the difference between the two. You're going to have that 1/3 and 2/3 mix to get that pile going. And I don't remember if I saw it in here, but typically if you're going to go, yeah, I think there is. I'll hold that comment till we get a little further. Sorry. So what to compost? Again, grass clippings, leaves, twigs, tree and shrub prunings, flowers. Maybe you were deadheading and you've got a bunch of brown and crispy flowers from that, sawdust. Maybe you're a woodworker. That's a good thing to use. Fruit and vegetable scraps from your kitchen, coffee grounds and tea bags, and eggshells. Now, the things that you don't want to compost, I pretty much left this presentation alone. These are kind of standardized. I like to use a lot of the infographics that tell you what to use and what not to use because they kind of stick in your head a little bit more, I think. I'm a big proponent of using those kinds of things to try to teach people since they tend to stick there better. But these kinds of items can attract pests, create stinky odors, and they can carry some pathogens. So you don't want to put dairy products out there, milk, butter, cheese, sour cream. That can get really stinky really fast. Meat, you'll be attracting raccoons and possums, dogs in the neighborhood. And then you'll have to clean all that up. So you don't really want to do that. Bones. Yes, we do add bone meal to our planting beds, but the bones, that can be kind of problematic. So I would leave those out. Dog and cat manure. Don't dump your kitty litter out there in the compost bin, and don't dump, what you've collected from the dog pen. There are ways that you can return that to the good earth, but that's not going to be in the compost pile that you're going to use for your garden. There are parasites that can be found in manure. So for that reason alone, as I mentioned, pathogens, you just don't want to do that. Oils and other cooking fats, they can go rancid. You also attract, animals, raccoons again. Those guys pop up everywhere looking for goodies. You don't want to attract them and get them used to coming into your yard. We get all sorts of phone calls from people saying, how do I get rid of fill in the blank? Possums, armadillos, raccoons, snakes. And that's one of the things that I ask folks. I'm like, do you have a compost bin and what are you putting into it? Because sometimes people are just not aware and they put the wrong things in there. Mayo, I don't know too many people who put mayonnaise in their compost bin, but leave that out. That's got a lot of fat in it. Whole eggs. Eggshells are great because of calcium, but we don't want to put the rest of the egg out there. There's a lot of fat and protein in that, again, attract pests. Weed seed heads or rhizomes. So some people might think, oh, well, I run a really hot compost bin or pile. I can, definitely kill off those weed seeds. Well, probably not. Just for the sake of being safe, bag those up and remove them off of your property. If you don't want to worry about getting weeds again, don't try to put them in your compost pile and hope that it gets a high enough temperature to kill the seeds off. You're just better off just not putting them there to begin with. Invasive plants, again, for the reason, yes, we do have thermophiles, bacteria that raise the temperature of that composting heap, but it's not uniform throughout the entire pile. So again, don't put anything in there that might possibly have seed that could spread, such as invasive plants or weed seeds, that kind of thing. You also don't want to put diseased or insect-ridden plants in there, because if you don't have a thorough heating across the board, you may end up with that you may be putting that back into your garden, and you don't want to do that. So leave this list off your, just don't do it. Don't put it back into your compost bin. Do not add lime. I don't get a lot of people that really ask me about this, but it's a good bit of information, and that's because lime converts ammonium nitrogen into ammonia gas, and that accelerates the loss of nitrogen from the pile. I know some people, especially folks that are in the community gardens, if it's a brand new community garden or you're adding a lot of that soil mixture that they provide you, especially with the Harvest Gwinnett folks, that isn't a fully decomposed mix. So you need to be really careful that first year and watch your plants. And if you notice a lot of new leaves, yellowing leaves, that's because it's a nitrogen sink. That material is not finished composting yet. And nitrogen is pulled out by the bacteria, a little separate from this, but that's just one thing that you kind of need to watch on newly finished raised beds, or if you're putting a lot of a particular type of compost into an in-ground bed or that kind of thing. So if you're putting a lot of that in and mixing it in, just make sure to watch, for the nitrogen, and don't add lime. Sometimes people get really excited about planting things, and I love that. I really do, and I get excited too. But sometimes they love their plants to death. I had somebody come in the office last week, and they had some blueberries, and they had put so much compost and sulfur, and then they took the pH of the bed after they mixed all of that in there, and he took it with a really cheap pH meter, and it said 3.8. So what did he do? He added lime because he wanted to get that into the range of 4.5 to 5.5. Well, then he decided maybe I should send a sample to the extension office. So that's what he did, and it came back at 5.5. So he just added lime on top of that. So don't love your plants to death. I always tell people, take a step back, try to think 3 to 6 months out. So take a soil sample in the fall. That way you'll kind of know where you are. But don't add lime to your compost pile. microorganisms that are in there typically prefer more acid environment to initiate decomposition. And you don't want to mess with that. Chemistry, I mean, some of what I've done, taught in the past, I've gone into chemistry a little bit. Sometimes it'll make your head explode. You don't need to do that. I'm not going to do that here. Just know that, you know, every living organism prefers its own pH, and most of what's going to be in a compost pile doesn't like a neutral or basic, meaning higher pH, 8, 7, or above. And we all know, or we should know, or now you know, most plants that are growing in a garden, there are exceptions, of course, like blueberries and some others, prefer to grow somewhere in the 6.5 range on the pH scale. So once it's all said and done, what you get out of your compost bin should be right at the perfect pH for what you want to grow, unless it's blueberries. Moisture management and turning. So sometimes you can have a compost pile or bin and it's too dry. So if it's summer and it's in a black bin and it hasn't rained for a while, you might need to add some water to it. So it needs to be pretty damp, kind of like a wrung out sponge, if you will, with whatever organic matter is in there. So make sure that you're adding water if it is too dry. If it's too wet, then you end up with a stinky bin or a stinky pile, and you might want to add some additional browns like leaves or pine straw or something like that to kind of reduce the moisture. That moisture does help it break down faster, but you know, you can have too much of a good thing, so we don't want to do that. And then you're going to also want to make sure you're turning the compost. So if you've got a bin, one of those crank handle bins, you can just go out there and turn it and it'll flip, and that's doing it. If you just have a pile, you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. You're going to get your, you know, your manure pitchfork or whatever you have, and you're actually going to go and flip it over and turn it over, and you're going to mix it all up, and that's going to help evenly get all of that material mixed, you know, help spread, excuse me. I don't have a cough button. All these allergies are making my asthma get a little wacky. But turning that compost is going to increase the air circulation, which that, of course, aids in the decomposition. You don't want it to necessarily get anaerobic. There's aerobic and anaerobic. Anaerobic means without oxygen. Aerobic is with oxygen. So anaerobic, there are ways to do it that way, but this is not what we're talking about here. So just stick with making sure that you get a good bit of air circulation in there, in your bin or your pile. And the more frequently you turn it, the faster it's going to decompose and you'll get compost. So just know that. A hot pile. Okay, so the critical temperature for killing human pathogens is 131 degrees Fahrenheit. And the critical temperature for destroying weed seeds is 145 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot. So I know we've all been, you know, at some place where we've seen a compost pile, or maybe we've driven past a subdivision, soon to be subdivision, and we see piles of mulched up trees and they're steaming. And that's because you're getting decomposition in the middle of that pile. You've got the thermophiles that are in there and they're driving up that temperature. So one thing that I can point out is if you've got just a pile, you really want to make sure that it's at least probably 2 to 3 feet tall, by at least that, maybe a little bit wider. And that's going to allow enough material to provide that inner area where you've got those thermophiles where you can actually get it hot enough to kill pathogens and the weed seeds. Now, again, we don't want to add that in there, but if there is any in there, that'll guarantee that you have enough material that you can get that temperature high enough in the middle of your pile. They do make fancy dancy, really long composting. My brain is escaping me. You know what I'm talking about. Thermometers. uh, they're really long. I mean, you can get 12-inch thermometers, you can get 16-inch, and that's so that you can stick it down in the middle of your pile and you can see what the temperature is in there. A lot of them also have a really nice range on there that'll be color coded. So you don't even have to really think about what was it that it needed to be. It'll just tell you if you're in that color range, if you're doing good. So I know several people who have those. I borrow my mom's if I need it, but they're a good thing to have if you're going to have a composting bin or pile at home. So types of home composting, you've got backyard composting, and that kind of goes into sheet composting or raised bed composting. We'll talk a little bit about each of these. Trenching, where you're going to do soil incorporation. Compost holing, traditional backyard compost structures, or these are the bins that you can buy from Amazon or at Lowe's or wherever. And then vermicomposting. And I'd like to throw chickens in there too, but again, this is not my presentation, but they are wonderful. And then you can get the manure from them and have a high nitrogen addition to your garden. So sheet composting, this is the easiest way to compost. You're going to basically spread a 2 to 6 inch layer of these browns and greens pretty much directly on your garden beds. And then you kind of let them slowly break down until you can mix them directly into or turn them into the soil. So pretty easy. You can do that with leaves. You can do that with, like if you have if you bag your grass and you have leaves that you rake, mix them together and put them out along your garden if you have an in-ground garden. The process kind of takes about 2 weeks to a season, depending on the soil conditions, weather conditions, the types of materials that you have. If you're just doing kitchen scraps, that kind of thing, then you might choose a different type of composting, and I'll go into that in the next slide. But this is good for like yard waste. I've seen it used pretty successfully for yard waste. Trench composting. So if you're doing a lot of in-ground gardening or you have flower beds or something like that, this is pretty simple. You basically just dig a trench and then, something that's about, 12 inches deep, give or take. And then you're going to just toss all of that stuff that you got from your kitchen or your vegetable garden waste, non-diseased vegetable garden waste, that kind of stuff in there. And then you're just going to cover it up with soil. And it's not someplace you're going to actually plant into, but you're going to put it next to. So as these materials break down, they convert into that rich humus, organic matter, and then that benefits the plants that you have growing nearby, if you have perennials or annuals or whatever. Or if it's a vegetable garden, then when you till that soil, you'll be adding that broken down rich organic matter into the main soil where you can then plant later. So this is a good way of doing it. And then compost holing, this is where you have a post hole digger and you basically just randomly go around in your planting beds or in between tomatoes or other things in your vegetable garden, and you dig the soil out, and then you just go back and put food scraps, your kitchen scraps in there, and then cover them up. And then over the course of that growing season, those materials break down, providing nutrients to the plant as it grows. And then we have the other types of composting systems. So you can have just a general pile where you don't have any special anything. It's just a big pile of stuff, browns and greens. You have holding bins. Those are the like rectangular bin structures that you just toss stuff up in the top and it's got a little hole down at the bottom. And then you just open the hole up, a little trap door, and you can get the compost out there. And they work really well. They have little holes in the top for water from rain to get in there, for you to just dump water in there. It helps keep animals out of it, which is kind of nice. And the good compost at the bottom is easily accessible through the little trap door. And then you have these, like you see in the picture, it's a tumbler system. So it allows you to move that material a lot. Some people like them, some people don't like them. Just kind of depends on what your preference is. So piles and heaps, this one's pretty simple. You just kind of toss everything into a pile. Again, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that it's about 3 foot tall by 4 foot wide if you can do that. Some people will take hog wire or hardware cloth or something. They'll get, maybe some pallets or something that kind of reins it in so that it doesn't get too terribly big, but you don't need that. You can just have a pile out in your backyard someplace, and that's where you put all your yard waste. Oops. Usually made from hog wire, hardware cloth again. Pretty cheap to build, and it helps to kind of keep things tidy. So like if you're in a subdivision and your neighbors get all difficult about your gardening habit and they don't want to see a messy pile, you could do something like this, maybe on a smaller scale. But the nice thing is if you wanted to move it, you would just unstake it, unwind the wire, and then you would have whatever mulch you have there in the pile. You can see in this picture, looks like a lot of leaves in the bottom and then grass on the top. It's a little harder to turn it. So understand that part of it. But yes, it will hold a lot, and it keeps everything kind of tidy. This is made of pallets. So again, pretty easy to kind of hammer that or secure that together. You could make one side on a hinge, so you could just open it up, add in your yard trimmings, vegetable scraps, that kind of stuff, and then you can just close it back up again. If you wanted to get all artsy, you could even paint on it, make it a little look like artwork. And I mean, you can also do something in like just a plastic garbage can, cut the bottom off, and then use that. And when it gets up to the top, then you can kind of lift it up and get the compost that way. All sorts of different things. I mean, if you ever needed ideas, you can always go to Pinterest. There's tons of them there on how to create your own homemade composting bins. Here's a purchased bin. I have one similar to this. It kind of just keeps it all neatly contained in this little plastic bin, and they're really easy to hide places. So, you don't have to have this big, ugly looking pile laying around. So great for HOAs so that you don't get nasty grams in the mail. Again, we talked about the tumblers. They're easy to tumble, keep compost mix, low maintenance, pest proof. Helps. Sometimes you have issues with too much moisture, as you'll notice that sometimes in those plastic bins. But these can make it faster. It's an active way of actually making it versus just a passive way. Okay, troubleshooting. So there's problems. I mean, they don't come without some problems. Sometimes they're at the back of your yard and you never notice it. Other times, if it's up near your house, you'll notice it. So what happens if you have a bad odor? Well, the problem is it's probably too wet. So I mentioned this before. A simple solution, just add some more browns like leaves or pine straw, and that'll help absorb some of the excess moisture and kind of neutralize the pH a little bit, giving you kind of a quick fix. It can also be not enough air. So it's gone anaerobic. I mentioned that earlier too. Sometimes anaerobic environments can give you stinky stuff. If you ever think about a swamp and you say you were walking across the swamp and it's the stinky gases that are escaping from the soil underneath. And that's because you don't have enough air in there. It has a distinct odor for sure. And so when you have a situation like that, you're just going to turn the pile. You're going to add some more oxygen in there, and that'll help get rid of some of that odor. If the center is dry, then that means there's not enough water. You're not getting enough rainwater down into there. So you just get the garden hose out, moisten it and turn it. If it's only warm in the middle, then your pile is too small. I mentioned that you really want it to be about 3 feet high by probably 4 feet wide. And obviously, if it's just a pile by itself, then it's not going to be able to sustain that 3 foot high. I mean, you have to kind of mound it up. So you want to try to add some more onto that, and that's going to help get that temperature up in the middle. If it won't heat up, you probably have a lack of nitrogen. So, or in easier ways, no greens. So cut your grass, dump some of those high nitrogen clippings into your pile and mix that in, and then that will start the process, the decomposition process. The bacteria will start working on that and increase that temperature. So certification checklist items, compost yard waste, leaves, grass clippings, branches, tree shrub trimmings. You're gonna not compost weed seed heads or rhizomes, invasive plants, or diseased insect-ridden plants, diseased fungal issues, bacterial issues, that kind of stuff, canker. Just get rid of all of that. If it has any type of a disease or fungal leaf spot, don't put it in your compost heap. You don't want to take the chance that it doesn't get hot enough. You're going to compost kitchen scraps, fruit and vegetables, eggshells, coffee grounds, and sawdust. You're not going to compost dairy, meat, bones, pet waste, oils, mayonnaise, whole eggs. You always want to make sure that you're aerating and properly keeping it wet. So just always think about a damp sponge and how if you squeeze it, you'll get a little bit of water, but it's not overly saturated, but it's moist, and that's about what you're looking for. So you're going to make sure you sprinkle it with water to kind of moisten it. And if it's too wet because we've gotten too much rain, then you can always add some additional leaves, pine straw, things like that, that kind of reduce moisture. So that's basically it. And I'm going to get out of here, and then I'll go to the website, and I'll kind of show everybody around there again too. But I did want to point out, this is the actual sign that you get. So I'm a sign person. I like it when I do nice things in my garden, and I can show that I've done nice things by getting a nice sign. So these are $15. They don't just give them to you, unfortunately, but they are very nice. They're very thick. So I can definitely recommend them. Okay, let's see. I'm going to stop sharing there, and then I'm going to find the website. I have way too many things open on my desktop. There it is. Okay. So this is the Georgia Green Landscape Stewards website. And if you search by that, this will immediately pop up. So you can see here, this is pretty much what I had on one of the first slides. And if you don't want to listen to me or Eric talk about these subjects, then you can, let's see. They have all the videos on here. There we go. So they have conveniently put all the videos on here. And you can download the PDF. You can download the video if you want, or you can just watch it. But they have all of these. They're all housed on YouTube, every last one of them. And Jessica Warren, she's in Camden County. She's actually she's the director, CEC. She created this program, and she does a lot of lunch and learns as well. I listen to them pretty regularly. She's a good speaker. I like her. So you can come here and check this out on your own time, or you can follow along with us. And there's additional resources. So here you can see there's the Center for Urban Ag. If you want to take a look at their website, they have all sorts of different certification programs there. lots of good resources on community gardens, that kind of thing. Then you have some native plants, ecoscapes. Here's a coastal plain. We're not in the coastal plain. That's probably more for down Savannah way in South Georgia. Native plant search engine. But here's the Southeastern Pollinator Census. Yeah, we had to change that. It's no longer just the Great Georgia Pollinator Census. We've got South Carolina and North Carolina in there with us now. Stormwater management, some information there. So lots and lots of good resources. And then, of course, when you start poking around here, you come up with other stuff and other links. And before you know it, you're very well versed on whatever the subject matter is. But let's see. So here's the scorecard. I'm not sure if it will open on here. Good, it does. Okay. So let's see if I can make that bigger. Okay, so you need 70 points. And I will tell you, most of you watching probably already have those 70 points. So you'll just get this sheet here and you can check mark whatever it is. So very simple, very user friendly. You just pull this up and then you go through and you're like, yeah, I do compost my yard waste. Hooray, I get 4 points. And then you can go down here. I do not compost dairy, meat, bones, and pet waste. I listen to Lisa. So I'm going to choose that. And it's the program is nice enough to add up your points for you. So, oops. So you can come down here. They've got mulching, welcoming pollinators, using pesticides wisely. You participate in the Great Pollinator Census. I know a lot of you do. I hope we'll have more that do. And then down at the very bottom, it will total up your points here. And when you reach 70 points, you're in. So then all you need to do is just fill your name in here. And if you want a certificate, let me see if I got a certificate. I think I did. I don't know where it went. I got a certificate. They'll send you a certificate. That's free of charge. It's a nice certificate. If you want the sign, it's $15, but it's worth it. I think it's nice. And then you just basically print this off and you send it to Camden County. So you mail the payment, Georgia Green Landscape Stewards down there in Camden County, and takes about, 10 days, and you'll get a nice little email back that says, thank you for doing this program. And they keep track of which counties are participating and that kind of thing. So, I'd love it if you all were interested. Hang on a second, I got to cough again. Apologies. I would love it if you are all interested in doing this program. But yeah, that's basically it. And I guess there's probably a few questions. And if anybody else has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat box. You want to read them, Eric, or you want me to read them?
I'll read them for you. I'll read them, you answer. All right, so I'm going to start at the top, and everyone can be typing in questions as you said. We'll start with Tim's question, which is, which type or size of compost bin is most functional for a community garden? The small plastic bins are nice as a demo tool in G101, but they aren't really useful for us. Lots of organic matter is wasted. Are there larger options?
That's a very good question. So a lot of the Harvest Gwinnett, I know you're specifically talking here over at Decula Garden. A lot of them have the smaller bins, and those are mostly just for show, just to kind of show you how if you would do this at home. The one that I would point to would be over at Rhodes Jordan or the Lawrenceville Community Garden. That's the very first one that they did. And they've actually got concrete block bins that they store the compost that they have, and then the materials that they're creating over there. And that's probably the easiest way, because if you've got a really large community garden, like Lenora is really big, it's probably, I think, one of the biggest ones that they have. You can get a front end loader or something in there. And that's what a lot of, I would say, larger agricultural operations do when they're composting, is they just use a front end loader. So you kind of have to find your happy medium in what volume of browns and greens are you working with. So maybe a little rectangular bin isn't big enough, but maybe you have 2 or 3 of the kind of bins that you turn, and that works, because over time, you don't have a ton of material, but you have enough that you can fill 3 of those. Maybe you just have, some 4x4 bins that are built with hardware cloth and 2x4s, and you have 3 or 4 of those in a row, and then you just go in there and turn them, and maybe that's enough. You just kind of have to see what's the volume of your greens and your browns that you're running through. You're probably going to have more greens because, again, you don't want to compost the weeds. So those are probably just going to go in a pile that you're going to eliminate or get rid of, the trash bin. But if you have, old vines that aren't inhabited by squash bugs, or tomatoes that don't have blight or something like that, you can definitely, put the healthy stuff in some type of a bin. It really just depends on how big is the garden, how much material are you dealing with. Do you have folks that are bringing their kitchen scraps to the garden to compost? Some people might. If they live in an apartment, then you might have people that are bringing scraps. So it's really something you gotta just have to bring up to discussion and kind of feel your way. It's going to be different for each garden. There's just no one answer that fits everything.
All right. Christine asks, do the eggshells need to be washed or just toss them in?
I just toss them in. You can break them up a little bit if you want to do that. So crush them. You don't have to pulverize them into a fine powder, but just kind of crush them up in a bowl or something like that, and then mix them in well with the other stuff. And usually that's fine. As a side note, I have chickens, and I actually reuse the eggshells as a calcium supplement for my birds. And for that, I do put them in the oven for about 2 hours at 250 to make them a little harder. And then I do pulverize them. And that helps. So if you wanted to take it an extra step, if you make them smaller particles, they will incorporate better with what you're trying to compost or feed them back to the birds. So smaller particles are always better. That goes for sawdust and browns if you're putting that in your compost pile versus big chunks of wood that maybe the tree company dumped in your front yard. So smaller is always better, but don't feel like you have to wash them or do anything special to them other than kind of break them down into smaller pieces.
All right, and here's a good question from Jim. Are shredded documents considered green or brown?
That would be a brown. And yes, you can use shredded paper. I wouldn't just take the piece of paper like this and dump it in there. Run it through the shredder and either strips or confetti. Confetti works really well. It's a smaller piece. Again, like I was mentioning before, the smaller pieces break down quicker. So I would go, if you have a shredder that has the confetti pieces, that's probably the better way to go, but it's a brown.
All right. Tim asks, what is the web address where you can find all this again?
That is good. Thank you for reminding me. Let me get that. Give me a second here. I'm going to put that in the chat box. There it is.
All right, great.
But it is very easily found. All you have to do is just search Georgia Green Landscape Stewards, and it's usually the first link that pops up.
All right, thank you. Jody asks, are clippings from lawns that are treated with chemicals permitted after a certain time frame?
So if your lawn has recently been treated with anything, it's you're probably referring to pesticides, so, or a herbicide or something like that. Generally, those are going to have to be watered in. So you wouldn't be out there cutting your grass anyway, because then you would be cutting away everything that you just applied to it. So I would say if if it's been applied and it's been rained in with at least an inch, you're okay to go out there and cut that grass. If you want to be super careful, most herbicides are going to have a residual of maybe a month, give or take. So if you want to be super careful, you can bag up all of your clippings and then kind of set them off to the side. But just note that you might get some that start to decompose. And they'll be stinky because it's just the greens that you're dealing with. The whole point of composting is mixing the greens with the browns. But honestly, I think you're probably okay on a herbicide. A pesticide, if you're trying to treat for armyworms or something like that, you're probably not going to be adding that to a compost bin. And I say you want to be careful with that because you've got all those little insects in there, the decomposers. You don't want to harm them. So, but honestly, if it was treated with a herbicide, a pre-emergent or something like that, probably a couple weeks. So maybe let it go, bag it and set it off to the side. And then just to be safe, and that's mostly just out of an abundance of caution and not having any residual pesticides that might come eventually in contact with you. But most of what's out there on the homeowner market is not anything I would really be concerned about. Most of what I would be concerned about would be used in pasture situations. We deal with a lot of grazon. I know that's been on the market now for 5 or 6 years, and it's pretty much the herbicide of choice for broadleaf weeds in pasture situations with horses or whatever. There's no withholding period, so you're able to spray that and then immediately your animals are on there. But the problem is that can stay in the soil for upwards of almost 3 years. And so tomatoes and peppers and some solanaceous plants are very sensitive to parts per billion even. And because it does not break down with UV rays, like a lot of other pesticides do, it stays in the soil for up to 3 years, and it's a growth regulator. So you can get all this wonderful compost and you can mix it into your garden and you can think you're doing a wonderful thing. And all of a sudden, after about a month, the tips of your tomato plants are curling under and they're not flowering anymore, and your whole crop is basically toast. And that's because of that. So just beware, even if you're not making your own compost and you're getting it from the horse farm down the road, ask them what kind of broadleaf weed killer they're using on their pastures, because that can have a big impact on your garden as well. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind.
You answered this next question in that last one, but let's just address it one more time. Is the question from Deborah and Richard: can you add grass clippings that have been treated with pesticides and fertilizers to your compost?
Fertilizer, I wouldn't really worry about it. Pesticides, again, you're probably going to have to water that in to your grass anyway. So I would say just kind of wait a couple weeks. I mean, we kind of look at that kind of stuff in half-lives, residuals. So every 2 weeks or so, it decreases in concentration to the point where if it's a homeowner type herbicide or pesticide that you can buy at Home Depot or something like that, I really wouldn't worry too much. And again, if it's something that's a farm chemical, or I consider it a farm chemical, be careful with that, because some of those do affect plants differently, and they're very long residual in the environment. But I would just, I mean, I can't see a situation where you would immediately go out there and cut your grass after you just sprayed it. So, for what that's worth.
All right, and then we have the link down there which you shared, and then the last question I see is from Larry. Can you safely compost paper that has ink on it, such as from a home printer?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people do that. A lot of inks out there are soy-based anyway. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. Nothing that, to me at least, nothing that I know of personally is going to be toxic and is going to cause problems. Nothing that you would get at Office Depot or whatever that I'm aware of.
All right. So if there are any other questions, now is the time to type them in. But it may be that we are through them all.
Sweet.
All right.
Well, I'm excited. I'm glad we had so many people show up. I know a lot of you are probably here because you wanted the CE. They're requiring you all to get, and that's perfectly fine. But maybe I've inspired some of you guys to go look up the website and check out the program and get your own really awesome aluminum sign, because you probably already qualify for it. So with that, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and end for the evening. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.